According to Consumer Affairs, Gen Z's purchasing power is now 86% lower than baby boomers at the same age, forcing them to spend twice as much on housing and over 300% more on public tuition, all while headlines label Gen Z as the wasted generation. Raising the question, how did the richest generation in American history leave behind a nation drowning in debt? Following World War II, the United States emerged with unprecedented global power, standing as the dominant force in the world economy. While Europe and Japan faced the immense task of rebuilding from the war's catastrophic destruction, the industrial dominance of the United States allowed the US economy to nearly double in size between 1939 and 1945, producing half the world's industrial output while driving up wages by over 60%. This economic expansion allowed millions of soldiers to return home to a nation primed for growth, where expanding industries, rising wages, and government-backed programs made homeownership and family life more accessible than ever, setting the stage for an unprecedented population surge, later known as the baby boom. Between 1946 and 1964, 76 million boomers were born in the United States, making up nearly 40% of the nation's population. Unlike previous generations, where children were predominantly expected to contribute to farm labor, the post-war era gave way to a more nurturing, indulgent approach. Parents who had endured the hardships of the Great Depression, as well as the war, sought to give their children a life of comfort and security, free from the struggles they had faced, specifically within the rapidly expanding American suburbs. These new communities, lined with identical houses, uniform driveways, and neatly trimmed lawns, ingrained the mindset that as long as you were indistinguishable from your neighbor, conforming to the carefully controlled structure of American life, stability and success were inevitable. Dr. Benjamin Spock's The Common Sense Book of Baby and Childcare became the defining voice of this movement, selling over 500,000 copies in just 6 months. His philosophy emphasized emotional well-being over discipline, protection over hardship, and personal happiness over resilience, reshaping American parenting and reinforcing the idea that childhood should be shielded from all struggle. And while it's hard to argue against raising children in a more supportive environment, in this pursuit of raising the perfect child, the nation drastically overcompensated. A 1954 New York Times article, Problems of the Overprivileged Child, warned of excessive protection and overindulgence taking hold with this new generation. Psychologists caution that children raised without hardship might later manufacture struggles, seeking validation through illness or other means to feel important as adults, particularly as early signs of declining health already began to emerge. A 1954 study of 4,500 healthy city and suburban dwelling children, aged 6 to 19, found that 56.6% failed to meet even a minimum standard for the kind of muscular strength and flexibility required for active good health. By comparison, in the very same study, only 8% of European children failed to meet the same standards, resulting in young boomers being labeled as coddled, pampered, and spoiled, with even Dr. Spock later admitting they were not resilient enough for the realities of adulthood. However, this wasn't just a shift in parenting. It became the nation's business model. With American spending habits shaped by Depression-era frugality and wartime rationing, corporations saw an opportunity to recondition the largest generation in American history into lifelong consumers, structuring the economy entirely around their wants and needs. Since children were largely expected to be seen and not heard, television quickly became the dominant force in America's nuclear family, allowing corporations to flood young boomers with advertisements designed to fuel their desires.
I dig it, you ain't hip, old man, to easy pop popping its own pants.
You mean easy pop popped in its own pants?
Now you're swinging, Daddy, crazy man.
One of the most influential figures behind this shift was Ernest Dickscher, often called the Freud of Madison Avenue or Mr. Mass Motivations, as he brought psychoanalytic techniques into advertising, uncovering the hidden desires of consumers and the subconscious insecurities that drove individual behavior, particularly in children. Inside his New York mansion, or what he called his living laboratory, rows of children lined the halls watching television, unaware that resident psychologists, crouching behind special screens, were decoding their reactions to advertising, learning how to manipulate their unconscious minds, and fostering the belief that fulfillment wasn't found in purpose or community, but through the relentless pursuit of material goods, a mindset that shaped not only their personal financial habits, but also the policies they supported, emphasizing spending over economic stability,
We found out in the 50s that if you got up in the morning and went to work and did a good day's work, the things got better. You got promoted or you got more money. You were able to buy furniture. You could have more children. The children could have better clothes, and life just improved. We knew it was because you went to work. But I'm not sure our children realized that. They saw simply that the clothes got better, the house got bigger, the neighborhood got nicer. And I have a strong suspicion that what happened in the late 60s was that the kids who rebelled took it for granted that life would improve automatically.
However, while materialism increasingly shaped American culture, it was the Cold War that fundamentally redefined how children envision their future. Unlike their parents, who had endured the direct hardships of war, boomers grew up in an era dominated by ideological conflict. The looming threat of nuclear war, coupled with intense global competition, created a pervasive fear of instability, where according to the Department of Psychology at Harvard University, this fear of nuclear annihilation fostered a sense of having no future, an anxiety that persisted into adulthood, influencing personal decisions like delaying marriage and shaping policies that deprioritized long-term stability. These tensions only deepened following the launch of Sputnik in 1957, which ignited widespread panic that the US was now falling behind in science and technology, where in response, public education underwent a rapid transformation, shifting away from traditional vocational training and emphasizing subjects that deemed critical for global leadership, resulting in the mindset that it was now a college degree that was the only guaranteed path to success. And by the time older baby boomers entered the workforce, Cold War investments in defense and technology had reinforced the belief that economic expansion was permanent, expecting the same stability that their parents had enjoyed. However, employers quickly grew frustrated with what they saw as an entitled generation, unwilling to adhere to the traditional workplace expectations.
And it allowed for a whole generation that I suppose we would now call spoiled kids, which from another point of view simply meant kids who had very high expectations in life with respect to freedom and happiness. They thought life was about being free and about being happy. And they carried those expectations forward into high school and into college, and brought with them a kind of a level of expectation that was simply unprecedented in, I would say, in world history.
Before we break down the impact that baby boomers had on the labor unions and, of course, Ronald Reagan, I'm actively reaching out to Mike Rowe, Scott Galloway, Jonathan Haidt, and Sarah Payne to get their perspectives on what is happening with some of these discussions. If this video is providing value to you and you would like to support the channel, I would greatly appreciate it if you liked and subscribed if you haven't already done so. It truly does help at least giving me a shot at getting to speak with these individuals. Thank you all so much for your support. To demonstrate employers' frustrations, a 1970 Time magazine article stated, "The young workers are of the same generation as the students who turned the universities into battlegrounds. Like college students, they are feisty, ebullient, and unwilling to put up with things as they are. As union members, they're an unsettling force, pushing labor leaders to heighten their demands for fear of being voted out of their own jobs. In many instances, young unionists have ousted the old leadership. This year, rank-and-file members have rejected a record 1 out of 12 contracts negotiated by embarrassed and harassed leaders. In San Francisco last month, the iron workers won a 30% increase in a 1-year contract, a raise of $2.01 an hour. And just for context, that would be an hourly raise of $16.78 today. Even so, the younger leadership is not satisfied. I don't understand what they really want, what it would take to satisfy them, resulting in society to now perceive unions as being unreasonable, planting the seeds for future policies that would gradually weaken their influence. At the same time, global competition intensified as foreign manufacturing fully recovered from the war, putting further pressure on American industries. Where the collapse of the Bretton Woods system in 1971 and the 1973 oil embargo further strained the economy, leading to mass layoffs, stagnating wages, and rising discontent among workers. And as the economic structure that had benefited early boomers began to fracture, the far larger and often overlooked second half of the baby boom, Generation Jones, came of age in an era where job security was no longer guaranteed, fueling growing resentment towards the system that their predecessors had taken for granted. Compounding this growing cynicism was a deepening distrust in American government, primarily shaped by Watergate, where millions of young Americans had their earliest understanding of politics defined by a president they only knew as Tricky Dick. At the same time, they watched the counterculture revolutionaries seamlessly integrate into the very establishment they had once opposed, becoming the same people stepping over the homeless to buy Rolexes. Or disillusioned with both government and the so-called revolutionaries who had abandoned their ideals, Generation Jones gravitated towards a leader who didn't propose government solutions, but instead a fundamental shift away from them. Ronald Reagan.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Running on a platform of low taxes, free markets, and deregulation, Reagan's presidency solidified a lasting ideological shift, redefining economic prosperity simply as a product of individual effort rather than accompanied by government policy, deepening skepticism towards labor unions, social programs, and regulations, reframing them as obstacles to economic growth rather than safeguards for stability. Where his administration, under the agenda of trickle-down economics, slashed the top marginal tax rate from 70% to 50%, arguing that reducing the burden on corporations and the ultra-wealthy would lead to a greater investment in the economy.
$101 for a Krabby Patty? With cheese, Mr. Squidward, with cheese.
At the same time, Reagan's tax cuts coincided with the lifting of SEC restrictions on corporate stock buybacks in 1982, legalizing what had previously been considered market manipulation, allowing corporations to funnel profits into inflating stock prices rather than reinvesting in wages or job creation, shifting the economy's focus from long-term stability into short-term financial gains. Reagan's administration also fundamentally reshaped the media landscape, transforming it from a public service into a corporate-driven industry. FCC Chairman Mark Fowler dismissed the idea of media responsibility, famously calling television just another appliance, a toaster with pictures. And this deregulation culminated in the 1987 repeal of the Fairness Doctrine, eliminating the requirement for balanced reporting and fueling the rise for partisan talk radio and cable news, where simultaneously relaxed ownership rules allowed corporations to consolidate media power, acquiring multiple local stations and shaping national narratives to now align with their interests. And with 24 Hours news networks needing a constant audience, political coverage became increasingly polarized, deepening ideological divisions and reinforcing partisan identities rather than information that served the common good, a plague that is intentionally tearing this nation apart. While partisan media reinforced ideological divides, corporate cost-cutting measures reshaped the labor market, abandoning the post-war model of stability in favor of short-term gains. Having further lost career stability, particularly as guaranteed pension plans were replaced with 401ks, Generation Jones adapted by forming dual-income households and embracing what is now popularly known as job hopping, averaging 10 jobs by the age of 34, often switching employers annually between 18 and 24, far surpassing both millennials and Gen Z at the same age. This frequent turnover further disincentivized companies from investing in long-term training and benefits, accelerating the decline of entry-level positions as employers scaled back in-house development programs. And yet, rather than addressing these economic shifts, financial struggles were instead reframed as personal shortcomings, resulting in a culture of unforgiving individualism, resulting in Gen Z to enter adulthood in an economy defined by stagnating wages, soaring costs, unaffordable housing, record-breaking debt, mass layoffs, all alongside an incredibly divided nation. And yet, the conversation remains unchanged, still stuck on the same cycle of work hard and get a college education, dismissing yet another generation as entitled and lazy, refusing to ever actually discuss the issues that impact each and every one of us. Where, for example, in 1989, tuition fees and room and board at a 4-year state university cost $4,274, or $11,138 today when adjusted for inflation. A student earning a minimum wage at $3.35, or $8.73 today, could cover a year's tuition with 1,276 hours of work. Today, the average cost of attendance at a public university is $27,100 $146 per year, and that same student would need to work 3,744 hours at the federal minimum wage of $7.25, or nearly triple the time required in 1989. And even if we raised it to $15 per hour, it would take 1,810 hours, making a debt-free degree nearly unattainable. Yet while the cost of education has skyrocketed, its value is in steep decline. Whereas in 1989, a recent college graduate earned an average salary of $34,900, or $90,954 today. Today's graduates make $68,516, with over half working jobs completely unrelated to their degree. Meanwhile, alongside a failing education system, decades of policy failures have left the nation $2.59 trillion behind in infrastructure investment, with 11 of 17 categories receiving a grade in the D range, including roads, transit, and public schools. The national debt has surpassed $36 trillion. Credit card debt has reached a record $1.3 trillion. Student loan debt has exceeded $1.7 trillion, with 62% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. And if current trends persist, after tax, after healthcare income for the average family is projected to decline by 37% by 2030, with rising healthcare costs accounting for the most of the loss. We are a part of a circus, and we don't realize that we are the main attraction. We have to begin having discussions. And I think a lot of people say, so how do we make this change? And I say, do your best. And I think that maybe that's like, I heard from someone that that's like woo-woo kind of magic because it's not an actual result. I want to show you the power of conversation. So my last video, for those of you that routinely watch and hopefully know me, I hope that you see I'm pretty steady. I try not to show much emotion, and if I do, it's in the last 10 minutes. But I refuse to point fingers. I refuse to place blame because I don't think it actually does anything. So I create this historical analysis on an issue that we all face. So my most recent video is why nobody wants to work anymore. Emotional title, right? Emotional thumbnail. These are just two of the examples of comments that I received. All I'm hearing from most of you snowflakes is excuses not to work. Yeah, work can suck. Yes, you are helping a company make money. Get over it. Do your part in society and get a job and earn your paper. It's called life. Get on board or don't eat. So I have a couple options when I see a comment like that, is that I can just get butthurt and I can mute him. I can get butthurt and I can ignore him, go on to my life, tell my friends, pity me, right? I can get butthurt and I can respond with emotion back to him. So I'm going to fuel the emotional response. Honestly, no one's going to say anything that I haven't already said 4 times worse to myself. That's a unfortunate thing to admit, but what I decided to do was to realize this is an emotional response to, in my opinion, a logical video. So what I want to do is I want to try to understand. I'm going to use this as an opportunity for hopefully growth for both of us. And I'm going to ask, what are you saying? So this is my comment to him. How is that what you got from this? Why even watch these videos if you can't expand beyond your limited mindset? Which I think you could argue is still a bit emotional, but this is what he sends in an email back to me. I threw a hurtful, half-cocked, and deleterious comment to the entire thread based on little more than maybe 3 minutes of watching the video you uploaded, because I lost my composure over something that I know so little about. If I were to be completely honest, this was nothing more than a canned response once used ad nauseum by my elders, and somehow I felt the baton was simply handed off to me as a steward of elder wisdom. So that already gives insight of how many people don't understand what it is that I think every single one of us does things, and we don't question why we do it, and we don't understand why we do it, but we continuously do it. And I think that almost like gets inherited as you get older, is that you were instructed, you were taught to think and act a certain way. And when you see it happening in a different way, judgment naturally flows through. So this is the next one. This one is really good. Selling your words to an audience is a pretty good gig, isn't it? Sounds like capitalism. What is a better alternative to capitalism? I'll listen. So again, it's like, I don't understand how capitalism even got brought up into this video. So I go through my decision of what it is that I want to do, and I decide, let's give another logical response. Yeah, I'm pro-capitalism. Not sure what your point is here. I don't know why you'd let some random dude trigger you. I'm agreeing with your comment. I'm trying to figure out what made you say that. Sorry, man. I was feeling irritable this morning. I heard no one wants to work anymore, and then complaints about work. Then I saw the first comment talking about boomers, and I made a snap judgment, made an offhand comment, and left. I feel under siege these days, hated by everyone. And he explained some things about himself that I'm not going to disclose. I wake up too early every morning and try to find a video to inspire me to want to go to work. I've worked hard for 50 years. I'm so tired, but can't afford to retire. I read your bio and felt bad for what I wrote. I'll watch your video and I'll make my comments afterwards. He watches it and says, yeah, man, I have a whole lot to say on this subject, and you are right on the money. I have said many times to the statement, no one wants to work anymore, not for what you're paying. I have 2 sons aged 21 and 20. I have worked with many young guys. I know what you are up against, and it's just getting worse all the time. I have explained your plight many times to people in my own generation of what they are doing to ruin things for everyone who comes next. It's the corporations that are ruining this country. When I got out of the Navy in 1984, I got my first job in construction by following a lumber truck out to a house that was being built. Times were simple then. I'm sorry for you guys. If I could change it, I would. I did not participate in this corruption. I went to my job every day. That's it. I was screwed, and I know it. And that takes bravery to have someone admit those things. And so, again, incredibly grateful for them both spending the time to do that. But what I'm trying to show is that we are talking about the same things. This is a time where logic and understanding has to get us out of this, because emotion is nothing more than this magnet that these corporations and narratives and agendas love to fuel. Let's navigate out of this together. Anyway, I hope this video was able to provide value to you. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's a special video. So, yeah, thank you all so much for your time. It was a longer one. Until next time, bye-bye.
But great as our tax burden is, it has not kept pace with public spending. For decades, we have piled deficit upon deficit, mortgaging our future and our children's future for the temporary convenience of the present. To continue this long trend is to guarantee tremendous social, cultural, political, and economic upheavals.